I'm Kyle Racki, the co-founder and CEO of Proposify.
How would you characterize the entrepreneurship ecosystem in Canada from your perspective? What do you see as some of its strengths and weaknesses?
So, like I'm sure many of your guests have said, I live in a little bit of my own bubble. I focus a lot on my own company and the city that I'm in, even. So I don't get a really broad perspective of what's going on in Canada. What I can say about living in Atlantic Canada, where I do in Halifax, Nova Scotia, is there's a ton of funding opportunities. There's a ton of government grants that we really rely on and depend on that give us a huge leg up. That I'm sure a lot of our American entrepreneurial counterparts could only wish they could get in on. But I think there's a lot of support from that standpoint. I know talking to like our investors who are based out of Toronto, CBGF, a lot of their philosophy around startups and investing in Canada has been that we put a lot of emphasis on the startup, but very little on the scale up. And so the few ones that we know of, the Shopifys, the Hootsuites, they really rely on a lot of American funding in order to scale up operations. Usually have to move, or at least have some kind of a presence in San Francisco. So that's kind of my high level take on the Canadian startup ecosystem. From what I hear talking to other entrepreneurs, and this is, maybe it's limited to Atlantic Canada, has been that for some early stage companies, it's very difficult to get in on funding. You usually have to have some level of traction in the market, some level of revenue. And I think that the bar is being raised all the time. I can speak to, even just locally, one of our investors is a Novacor based out of Halifax. And they, I think the bar is around 10K MRR or something like that now to get invested. And the bar was much lower before. So we wouldn't have even qualified when we went for it 5 years ago. So I think for really early stage companies, getting seed capital is harder. And maybe that is where they have to go to the US to get that.
I see you were the subject of a Time magazine article in 2016. That's pretty impressive, frankly, for a Canadian startup at the time, or frankly, for any Canadian story, to make it in the Time magazine. It does sound like it was, for a really, difficult experience that you had that year of hell. What does that exactly mean? What is your journey there?
The year of hell was essentially, it was about maybe 4 years into my business. So it would have been around 2012. And everything, all the sort of personal losses compounded in 1 year, along with a lot of business failures. So in 1 year, I lost a belief system, which I had been raised up with, very kind of evangelical cult. Kind of woke up from that, realized I didn't want to be in it anymore, which resulted in the loss of most of my family and community. My father died the same year. I got divorced, and my business was essentially running on fumes. And I wasn't sure, I didn't have enough money to pay the bridge toll to get over to work one day. So that was kind of the year of hell, and it was really kind of more like 2 years of hell. But thankfully, I'm in a much better place today. I think having the support of my business partner, Kevin, was pretty key because he's almost like family, or like a replacement older brother. So yeah, no, I got support from him and other people that I knew. There was kind of another community willing to open its arms while I was going through those struggles. And it was really the entrepreneurial startup community in Halifax for the most part. So we worked through it. I think I've got a little bit of natural ingrained stubbornness, I guess you could call it, or resiliency, that the more I'm kind of pressed down, the harder I work to kind of push through it, which is, I think, just a good trait in general for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, you have the guitars behind you and you have kind of this rocker look. I think I'm probably not too far off the mark. It's not necessarily the image that you would imagine, again, of an entrepreneur, certainly in tech, which I think would be quite different. You talked earlier about your resiliency. How would you describe what you think are the core traits of your character, but generally speaking, of an entrepreneur that you think are most important?
That's a great question, and one that I love talking about, because um, there is something unique about entrepreneurs, and you don't get any real training in school for it. The school system is generally there to create employees, and they train you how to be a good employee and how to study and follow the rules and do what you're told. And usually entrepreneurship requires somebody who is ready and willing to break the rules in order to create something new that doesn't exist. So there's a little bit of that rebellious streak, I think, that a lot of entrepreneurs have, and I, they're classic overused examples, but I think still worth saying, like Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, probably many others are college dropouts, and I think there's a reason for that. I myself got okay marks in school, 60s, 70s, sometimes 80s, but I was not academically gifted. And I didn't know I wanted to be an entrepreneur. All I knew was I liked design and I liked, creativity. So I think there's a lot of different factors and traits that go into an entrepreneur, but resiliency, problem solving, ability to kind of take abstract concepts and crystallize them, and most importantly, move on them. Like, don't sit around for years dreaming, but actually put, pen to paper or fingers to keyboard and just make it happen. That's some of it, I think. I think the transition that every entrepreneur makes as you start to scale is trying to figure out how to go from being really good or okay at a lot of different things, whether it's sales, marketing, product development. You usually have to be very good at putting your head down and just working your, I don't know how much I can swear. I probably can't, but work your butt off for um, hours and hours a day, and probably sacrifice a lot of other parts of your life that you shouldn't. Um, not spend as much time with your friends, and not go out as much, or like, you've got to be extremely, almost obsessive about building the business in order to make it work. But then once it actually is working and it's starting to scale and you're now hiring people, that next piece is where a lot of entrepreneurs struggle, because they're so good at doing the work. They don't know how to hire right. They don't know how to lead effectively. They usually don't, learning like strategic planning frameworks and running one-on-ones and doing an effective all hands presentation. Like, those are more of the leadership traits that a lot of entrepreneurs don't have, and they need to learn them.
I know that you have some sort of key advices to share with entrepreneurs, or maybe your younger self, or anyone wanting to start a business right now in Canada. What are your key advices?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a lot of different ways we could go with that. I mean, I think entrepreneurship is really important, and I like to talk about it because I think a lot of kids and a lot of young people don't understand that this is available to them. It's becoming more, there's a lot more awareness around the space. I think in the last 20 years, we are talking about entrepreneurship in a way that's almost cool, like a rock star. You have people like Gary Vaynerchuk who get stopped on the street to take selfies. You've got, Jeff Bezos in celebrity gossip magazines. Like, these kind of things weren't really happening in the 80s and 90s for entrepreneurs. Like, entrepreneurship wasn't cool. It wasn't considered to be, it was usually just nutcases who decide to go out and start businesses. So entrepreneurship is cooler now, but it also, I think what people don't realize is that, like, the fundamentals of business haven't really changed that much, just because the mechanism to deliver products is different, because it's easier to distribute and hosting costs are low. Like, you still have to grind it out. You still have to struggle for a long time, and it's not going to magically happen. I think sometimes younger people have this notion that just because it's cool now to be like a tech entrepreneur, it's a really fast path to success, and it hasn't really gotten easier. So it requires being obsessive about not trying to achieve money, but trying to solve a really important problem. And I think if you focus on delivering value to customers and solving their problems, the money is just a natural byproduct. But a lot of people chase the money, and the more you chase it, it eludes you. I was never formally trained in sales, but I was formally trained in in speaking and teaching, because that was in the religion that I grew up. There was like weekly training on like public speaking and that kind of thing. So that's the approach I've always taken. Was I always really like to take complicated concepts and try to, make them very digestible and easy to understand. And that trait naturally correlates to sales. That's one thing. And then the other thing is that if you get really good at creating content that people find enjoyable or entertaining or valuable in some way, it creates and forms trust and bond with potential buyers. And so they're more willing and likely to buy from somebody that's taught them something than, somebody just coming in with a hard sell.
Final question. If you had 30 seconds to pitch an individual or a group in Canada, whoever you want, from the Prime Minister to the entrepreneurship community to investors, what would you pitch if your goal was to try to, improve ultimately the entrepreneurship ecosystem, or, since you mentioned it, encourage more youth, more Canadians to be entrepreneurial in 30 seconds?
I would try to convince government to put more emphasis on educating and giving resources to underrepresented groups, particularly Black and Indigenous. I think there's a huge opportunity to offer a level playing field to other members of the community. I don't think it's a coincidence that a ton of us tech entrepreneurs or just entrepreneurs in general are white men. I think it's very systemic, and I think just offering more opportunities to other upper underrepresented groups, we will start to see the net benefit of that in 10, 20 years.